Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 167, recorded for the week of May 25th, 2022. The Cloud Pod gets sucked in by the Graviton3. Good evening, Jonathan and Ryan. How's it going?
Hey there.
It's going good.
And well, we almost had Peter, almost, and then he had to take care of something, and so he had to bail out at the very last minute. But we do promise he exists, we think.
We almost let him out of the dungeon.
Almost let him out, yeah. Just, that he did have to bite the guard instead, and so we had to put him back in. So it's been a busy week. Apparently it's Microsoft Build week, and shame on all of our listeners because I've yet to mention Microsoft Build in any of the things coming up events because no one messaged me to find out to tell me that it was this week. Nor did I pay attention to the Microsoft events page where it was listed very clearly. I failed. So I'm going to blame the listeners, but it's really my fault. But I'm going to still blame them. So it's fine. No one called in or wrote in to say, "Hey, Justin, Microsoft Builds in 3 weeks, and you're not talking about it." So there you go. All right. Well, first up is some general news from HashiCorp. They went on an adoption spree this week and adopted our good friend HCL extension for VS Studio code. The change allows Hashi to provide a consistent editing experience for both Terraform users and users of the HCL-based products and continue delivering updates that actually reflect HCL2 and any changes to language. William Holroyd originally built this back in 2016 and has been maintaining it for the last several years with over 125,000 installs out there. But unfortunately, it was not supporting the HCL v2, so its value was starting to diminish greatly as HCL v2 was adopted in Terraform 0.1.2, in Packeter 1.5, and Nomad in 1.0. And HCL, or HashiCorp, has said they will support HCL v2 very soon. So if you were a big fan of the HCL extension for VS Code and you have not been using it, sadly, you'll be able to start using it again very, very soon.
I'm slightly embarrassed how much I'm excited about this, just because around Terraform 11, I used this a lot, and it's very handy. It was great. But once moving on, the majority of the code base is on newer versions. I don't even think I have this installed anymore. So I'm excited to have this officially supported, and especially when you type and as great as I do, these extensions are life-saving. So very happy about this. Although it's one of many things that in this podcast where I'm like super excited about, where I'm like, oh, I need some hobbies.
Yeah, when I put this in, so I literally, when I wrote the show notes this morning, and I was like, this story, I'm kind of interested in it, but I don't know that the guys are going to be interested in it, and I bet it gets nuked in the run through. And then we got to run through, and you were like, I'm super excited for the story. And I was like, well, that was not expected. So that just proves to me that I'm not fully aware of all of your hobbies or things that get you excited, Brian. And so I'll just keep putting these things in the show notes, and you can tell me when I'm wrong. So it's Jonathan was like, let's kill the story. And it was too much, Ryan was just too excited. We couldn't do that.
Yeah. Giddy little girl back here. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, AWS Backup now supports Amazon FSx for NetApp on tap. And this is AWS Backup support for FSx on NetApp, as you just heard. But if somehow this got the full blog treatment, but there's really nothing there. So I really just want to take this opportunity to say, hey, we have a really great interview with Andrew Lai that we did for TCP Talks, and it's all about NetApp and the NetApp products on AWS and Azure and GCP. And if you haven't listened to it yet, it's on our main feed. You should check that out, and then you can learn all about NetApp's stuff there. And I'm just going to pimp our show as we talk about AWS Backup for FSx for NetApp. Jonathan apparently didn't like the episode as much because he didn't support me in this decision, but it's fine. He was there. He interviewed the guy too. Ryan hasn't listened to that show yet because he's too busy. But
I think it's one of my favorite interviews, actually.
Yeah, it's one of mine too. That's why I thought I should pimp it again. That's why I left this here in the show notes, because otherwise the story would have got killed too.
And I love NetApp's story of modernization, right? And so while you're right, I haven't listened to it because I'm behind in my podcast listening in general. I am super excited about this because of, it's to listen to that show, just because it is talking about, a lot of things that I've seen NetApp do over the last few years, which, is very atypical for a storage company in their industry. So it's pretty great.
Yeah, my podcast listening is way down too, just because I don't commute as much anymore. But I have been commuting more lately, and it has been nice to get caught up on some podcasts that I had not been getting to in because there's ones you prioritize over everything else, and then there's ones that you're like, I like to listen to those, but I won't get to them. it's been nice to get those ones that are kind of out there. So it's been fun. Sorry, Jonathan, I cut you off.
That's fine. We talked a lot about the risk they took in the fact that by building these tools, it was really just an enablement of migration from on-prem to cloud, and then all of a sudden you're using cloud native services, and NetApp aren't in the picture anymore. And so it was a conscious risk they took, and they're aware of that, and they sort of embraced it in a way, and they're all about providing the best service they can wherever they can provide it. It's all about the software and the service.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely go and listen.
Well, and it's also nice too that once you get migrated, you're so tired of migrating to the cloud that you're just like, yeah, I'm not going to move off of the NetApp thing. It works. I'm just not going to touch it anymore, and I'll pay them for the next several years before I get back to moving that to native. So that's very true in some ways.
Yeah.
Well, the Graviton3 processor is now generally available. If you did not get into the preview after it got announced at reInvent, you can now go into your console and click, and have some new Graviton3 systems for you. Designated as the C7G family, the C for compute, the G for Graviton. It apparently will help you reduce 25% of your costs over the Graviton 2. And when the Graviton 2 was announced, it saved you 40% over the Graviton 1. So if you're on Graviton 1 and you just didn't think 40% was enough, and you really wanted that to be over 50% to make it worth your while, now you have over 75 or about 65%. I can do math. 65% improvement over the Graviton 1 if you do to the 3. It also uses 60% less energy, making it more green. If you're trying in one of those businesses that cares about making sure your company is sustainable, this will help you get there. And it's available to you on demand, in spot instances, and via the savings plans today.
I wish they kind of publish actual numbers. How many watts, how much energy does it really use? The percentages kind of show incremental improvements, but I guess it's because they also partner with AMD and Intel, and they don't want to say, "Hey, we're this much better than our partner," and so it's a bit of diplomacy around that. But it's awesome, and so much faster at floating point, which means it's going to be better at encryption than Graviton 2 was. I think that was a pretty big criticism. So awesome.
I think that's the big kicker, right? It's so workload dependent, right? So it's great at floating point, that kind of thing, but it's sort of terrible at large transactions or multi-transactions. So it's it's one of those things where depending on your application, you're going to see a huge amount of performance gain, but certain applications, especially ones that aren't very modern, aren't going to see as much.
Yeah, I think Intel and AMD realized very early on that there were some very specific use cases for CPUs, and they optimized and they added specific instructions for things like that. And so Graviton's done its best, and they're catching up a little bit with those specific optimizations for use cases like
definitely a different priority set, right? Yeah. They're trying to reduce the power consumption. They're trying to reduce especially the cryptography. It's just. And that's fine, right? It just means that this is better than that thing, and this other thing is better at this other thing, and it's knowing which tool to use at the right time is key.
Yep.
AWS Control Tower is now going to support operational concurrency for all guardrail types, preventative or detective types. With this new release, you can now enable or disable multiple preventive guardrails without needing to wait for individual guardrail operations to complete. And you can enable different preventative guardrails, including disallow creation of access key for root users, or disallow delete actions on Amazon S3 buckets without MFA on the same organizational unit, or the same preventative guardrails on different organizational units concurrently, which was a big problem if you're trying to do this programmatically, because you could not do it across your entire organization all at the same time. You had to roll it out slowly across your hundreds of potential accounts in your organization.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things with Control Tower. If you're starting net new, this is an awesome enablement. If you're trying to adopt it after the fact, Control Tower has some rough edges that are really hard to work around. Mm-hmm. And, you really have to lean into it to kind of force it through. And, to be perfectly honest, with my current workload, I have not put in that effort. I have a solution that works. It does all the same things. In some ways I like it better. But, I do think that, anyone who's adopting AWS in a newer fashion, the fact that they don't have to develop their own, version of Control Tower is fantastic. And this is one of those things where you learn this one the hard way, this limitation that they just fixed. So this is great.
Amazon Kendra continues its battle to get all the services that I actually care about into its database. This time, Jira is now available to you, which I wish they were also getting as Confluence right now, but Jira I'll take as step one, and then Confluence next week, please, or in 2 weeks from now. Because if you give me Jira and Confluence, I would actually enable this tomorrow and actually use this thing
immediately.
Yeah, because the search capability of Jira and Confluence is trash.
Terrible.
Yeah, anything's better than Confluence Search.
So if you've been waiting for Kendra to get to something you actually cared about in dev, here you go, Jira. Get to work.
I would stand up a whole new UI. Like it would just be a whole new service. It was like there's Confluence and there's searching Confluence, and it would just be a whole different thing.
Yeah, and you know how you can in Confluence and Jira you can actually put in custom URLs. I just have it as a custom URL in the dropdown where it just be search Jira and Confluence together, like on this lovely Google page. That's just Kendra. So yes, finally, they're going to the services that I care about. So it's about time. Incident Manager now supports incident runbooks, which is one of the things we talked about when it was first launched. The service runs remediation actions on the involved resources, such as turning on auto-scaling on a DynamoDB table that's approaching capacity before engaging the on-call engineer and waking him up at 2 a.m. Customers can also invoke additional runbooks directly from the Incident Management console now to resolve your issues even faster. This is great. I avoid the page. That's what I say.
I love announcements like this. Yeah, these things where you may not want to increase the cost until you need it, or those types of things, but it's also sort of, why wake up someone if it can just be fixed? That the first thing someone's going to do when that threshold is going to be raise the threshold, kill the pain. Then you can sort of, with a cool head, and sleep, assess the situation, what you're going to do long term. So this is fantastic.
Yeah, and I love the idea that their example was auto-scaling DynamoDB table. Because at 2 a.m. when it gets paged, just turn on the auto-scaling thing, and then I'll figure it out during the daytime if I want that to be auto-scaling or I want to actually create a new upper threshold.
Yeah, I guess some of these things that it's doing, though, should be kind of worked back into the best practices when you're deploying applications in the first place. Like, you should already have had this turned on. And we're doing you a favor by turning it on at 2 o'clock in the morning to save waking up your guys or girls. But yeah, I guess all the lessons learned for all these runbooks are just lead back into the way you should have done it originally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's tricky. Like in practice, it gets a little tricky because you want to prevent the runaway sort of problem where you've entered in a defect, and so you're effectively DDoSing yourself and those types of things. But yeah.
I mean, it all comes down to money, I guess. Like you should better set a price limit. Make remediations as long as it doesn't cost me more than this much to keep the lights on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that'd be an interesting caveat to the automation, right? In your runbook, could you query the cost API and be like, yeah.
All right. AWS Resilience Hub now supports ECS, Graviton3, Elastic DR, and AWS Backup. Now they can use Terraform as a source to upload those applications to the Resilience Hub. And with this expansion of supported resources, you can also use Resilience Hub to prepare and protect even more of your applications from disruption. Alongside the newly supported services, you can now update your app's resilience score, and the new resilience score reflects a combination of operational recommendations and policy compliance. It provides a more inclusive indicator of your app's readiness for different disruption scenarios.
Yeah, this is still on my list of things that I want to try and haven't gotten around to yet. And so the fact that, now it's going to natively ingest my infrastructure as code in its form now makes it, a lot easier for me to get to that list. I still won't. We all know that. But I will, I won't take it off the list because, they keep making it easier and easier, and I keep getting less and less excuses to avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember when this came out and it was like CloudFormation. It was like, why CloudFormation of all the things? I think it also supported CDK early on. So yeah, having Terraform now means they're covering pretty much the top 3 infrastructure as code providers. Sorry, Pulumi, that are out there. And so, I'm definitely glad to see this. Yeah, that gets support pretty quickly, actually, because I think this came out not that long ago.
It wasn't that long, yeah.
Yeah, so this is maybe 4 or 5 months after it came out. So yeah, it was great to see this fast follow on Terraform. And then finally, AWS admits once again that multi-cloud is a real thing by giving us a new feature for AWS Data Sync. To move data to and from different AWS storage capabilities like S3 or EFS or FSX for NetApp or ZFS or any of the other FSX flavors. You can use AWS Data Sync to move and set up those jobs to automate and accelerate the moving. This is great. Saves you a bunch of money as it also has things like encryption and compression turned on by default, and you can save a lot of money versus normal, S3 get object functions that you might have done to move something to an EFS server that you mounted to a Linux box, which is how we used to do it with this. But now, if you're multi-cloud, you have to do a bunch more work. But now Data Sync supports Google Cloud Storage and Microsoft Azure files. And this simplifies your data processing for storage consolidation tasks. It also helps if you need to import, share, and exchange data with customers, vendors, or partners who use Google Cloud Storage or Microsoft Azure files. And Data Sync provides end-to-end security, including encryption and integrity validation to ensure your data arrives securely, intact, and ready to use. There you go. That's pretty great.
Yeah, I was really happy to see the integrity validation. Just it's been a part of so many migrations, moving from workloads from one cloud to the other. If you got any kind of compliance concern, you got to prove that you moved everything intact. And so it's really nice to see that included, because it's such a nightmare to have to sort of invent your own version of this and store it away for the auditors later.
Yep.
I focused on the most boring aspect of this because that's my life right now.
Yeah, earlier you had a whole conversation about compliance and how boring compliance was. Then you're like, this is really great for compliance. Like, really, Ryan? Okay. I do want to point out that they don't give you a discount on egress fees for using Data Sync. I mean, it does save you some money because of that ability to compress on transit. But you will be paying your egress fees to all of your cloud providers as you transfer data between them. So do keep that in mind. It was cheap to put the data there. It's not cheap to get it out.
Yeah. And it's not quite as heroic as Google's, like, where they'll access your data in S3 as is, right? You know, in BigQuery. This is more just an enablement for migration.
Yeah, it's not simple to use either, to be fair. It's just it's a path. It's a different path to doing it yourself. And it's a two-way street, you know, data in and data out. So it's a risk to provide this kind of service. At the same time, it's an opportunity for sales and new use cases, new customers.
Do you ever think that Microsoft and Azure and GCP will get together and say, look, we're just going to put big pipes between our companies so we can send data on our own dedicated pipes between these systems and make our customers really happy by enabling multi-cloud? Do you think that would happen, or do you think that's so pie in the sky that will never happen?
I think you're absolutely right that they will get together and say, let's put the big pipes in ease communication. I do not think the customers will ever have any knowledge in that, because I think that they will continue to make as much money as possible on that data access, all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way they're already doing it indirectly, because they peer with the biggest internet providers anyway, and so the paths between them are probably fairly short to begin with. Mm-hmm. Especially, you know, with places like North Virginia, where everyone's got data centers and there's tons of fiber and there's tons of connectivity, so it's probably already very fast.
Yeah, because if they're not doing it, the ISPs will do it directly just to make their lives easier.
All right, let's move to GCP. Like me, you probably wondered, what that new shiny GKA cluster would cost you to run. And if you've ever tried to figure this out, you probably said WTF, especially if you're new to Kubernetes and don't have any reference points from your existing infrastructure. But Google has your back this week with the new GKE cost estimator in preview, which is seamlessly integrated directly into the console, which, hey, can we get an API on this too? But I'll take the console for now. This is just the latest of a number of features to help you understand and optimize your GKE environment better. For example, there's a GKE built-in workload right-sizing or the GKE cost optimization insights. And in addition, if you're using GKE Autopilot, you pay for resources that you request for your currently scheduled pods, eliminating the need to manage your cost of nodes altogether. The GKE cost estimate is part of the GKE cluster configuration flow and surfaces a number of variables that can help affect your compute running costs. You can see the breakdown of the cost between management fees, individual node pools, licenses, and more. It doesn't cover everything, though, because logging and networking are typically driven by the container itself, which you can't see yet, or any type of your discounts you may have special with Google Cloud, like your enterprise agreement. But it does cover the main GKE computer components, which honestly are probably the biggest cost unless you're logging in debug mode. That might be your biggest. But at least for the most part, in a healthy application, I think this is a pretty good first start.
Yeah, nice. So it shows you things like this month it's going to cost you $15,000 and your soul.
That could have been the show title.
Yeah.
We need to start doing the show titles during the show, I think.
Start doing it at the end of the show after we record, after we do the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then we'll just insert at the beginning. Yeah, we could do that.
I was laughing because it was like, this feature isn't developed for you because you're curious about the cost. This is developed specifically for the people who are not curious about the cost. And so it's a big red number when they're doing the deployment. It was like, oh, I should probably not do that.
Or maybe I should go check with somebody like, hey, do you know this cluster you want is going to cost $40,000 a month? Did you know that? Yeah. And then, well, maybe we don't want to do that. I was having this conversation with one of my employees the other day, and we were talking about, I think it's the Terraform open source cloud estimator that you can plug in, and it tells you basically what your Terraform is going to cost you. And he's like, yeah, but it doesn't have our discounts and all that. I'm like, yeah, but that's not honestly why you do it. It's so you have a rough idea of what it costs at a rack rate, and that makes you think. Yeah. And so, I said, you're right. It isn't an exact cost, but just being able to see a number and put a number to what you're doing makes people have different behaviors. And so it's worth integrating into our pipeline in some way.
Yeah, and
it just has to be self-referential, right? Like, compared to itself.
In a way, it doesn't matter what the actual number is. What matters is how much does it go up by, how much does it go down by when you make changes.
Yep. But it does have to have a dollar sign in that metric, because otherwise people ignore it. So it is funny that way. Like, psychology is strange.
I like measuring things in headcount, actually. Like, we could spin this cluster up, or you could have 3 more people on your team.
We were doing that as we were saving. We turned off this thing. They're like, that's costing us $300,000 a month, and I was like, yeah, that's 2 headcount. They're like, wow.
Yeah, that's a gut punch. Yeah.
When you start putting it in terms of headcount, it does suddenly change some of the conversations dramatically. Like, oh, well, but if I save you that money, can I get the headcount? You might be able to. No. You might be able to. Hey, I'll make the case if it's the right thing to do. So if you can keep the cost down, and I can save that. Sure, I'll give you part. I'll give you 1, and I'll take the other half of savings for my budget. Well, this one actually isn't really a feature that you'll see directly, but I thought it was interesting. I thought we should talk about it just a little bit. So Google has this whole article about encryption and cryptographic hardware offloading at scale, and how they do that. And so I think they did open source this, but again, like, you're not going to use this unless you're a total data nerd. But Google talks about the strong overhead of TLS and TCP connections and all of the challenges of doing TLS and TCP at scale. Google apparently requires per connection encryption and authentication similar to TLS, but at Google scale, the implications of crypto offload must support millions of live TCP connections and sustain 100,000 new connections per second at peak. And before inventing a solution to solve this, they investigated both the TLS and the IPsec protocol to solve this. They call out the TLS meets their needs, but it is not an offload-friendly solution because of the tight coupling between the connection state in the kernel and the offload state in hardware, as well as it doesn't support non-TCP transfer protocols like UDP. And then they talk about IPsec, which is transport independent and can be offloaded to hardware. However, it is not economical to scale, partly because they store the full encryption state in an associative hardware table with modest update rates. Assuming the size of an entry is 256 bytes in each direction, transmit, receive, and the total memory requirement of 10 million connections is 5 gigabytes. Which is well beyond the affordable capacity of commodity offload engines. And ultimately, they decided IPsec doesn't meet their security requirements as it lacks the support for keys per layer for connections. To address this, Google has developed a new protocol called PSP, a recursive acronym for PSP Security Protocol, a TLS-like protocol that is transport independent, enables per connection security, and is offload friendly. At Google, they employ all the protocols depending on the use case. For example, they use TLS for user-facing connections, they use IPsec for site-to-site encryption, where they need interoperability with third-party appliances, and they use PSP for intra- and inter-data center traffic. PSP is designed to meet the requirements of large-scale data center traffic, does not mandate specific key exchange protocols, and offers fewer choices for the packet format and cryptographic A-logs. It enables per-connection security by allowing encryption key per layer for connection, such as TCP. It supports stateless operations because the encryption state can be passed to the device in the packet descriptor when transmitting packets and can be derived when receiving packets using a security parameter index and an on-device master key. So what this means is at some point, everyone will be moving to PSP and TLS will go the way of the dodo bird, which is great. And this is open source. And so I assume you'll see a lot of development in this in the next couple of years. I guess this is an announcement technically because it is open source. So I imagine it's on the Google GitHub. I didn't go look, but if you're interested in this technology and trying to do this at scale, this might be a really great technology.
It's good to see like a ground up redesign of this kind of thing, because we get stuck in these mental grooves of thinking that we need to make iterative changes all the time. And SSL's been around for like 30 years or something, and then TLS came and replaced it. It's good to take a step back and do like a first principles reimplementation of solving the actual problem. And it makes sense that people at Google scale that do this kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is like a huge, undertaking, and so it's fantastic. And I remember working, at Yahoo when Prism was announced, as public, and so just the ability of the NSA to basically just be able to take everything that's on the internet backbone and just look at it, right? And companies had to sort of scramble to that because it was like they didn't even think of this being sort of thing that they had to protect against. And like this is encrypting and decrypting all of that traffic. So you think data center to data center, like it's massive. So it's great. I love seeing announcements like this.
Yeah, and to think that maybe 10, 15 years ago, the overhead for SSL or TLS was like 10% of a CPU, and now we're down to maybe 1% or 2% worth of overhead for doing that data. This and they didn't actually tell us quite what that brings it down to. Like, how does that compare with TLS exactly? But 100,000.
Other than the offload's easier, and I think offload is typically where you get your CPU consumption for TLS.
Yeah, so you're basically moving this off of the box and moving into a dedicated device with ASICs or custom silicone to do these things. And then you can get massive throughput for very low cost and optimize it very effectively. But you're right, like TLS, you couldn't do that. So that was one of the big limitations of TLS and some of these things was that you got very little offload, or you had to do re-encryption or you go to a F5 device and you terminate encryption there, then you go plain text across the wire in the back end, just because that was so much overhead, and you could do some ASIC offload there, but just not enough to make it worthwhile in a big scale. And Google's not buying massive big iron F5s to do these things. They're using open source technology and open source software to do this, and so their challenge is much different than what you would do in a smaller data center.
But then they open source it, so everyone, because
Everyone
not
can use it
everyone
now.
has Google's resources. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, super excited about it. Well, Google is announcing the Cloud Beta Terraform Vet, which is a terrible name. It'll eventually be Cloud Terraform Vet, which is better, but still terrible. The Vet is a client-side tool available at no charge and enables policy validations for your infrastructure deployments and existing infrastructure pipelines. And with this release, you can now write policies on any resource from Terraform's Google or Google Beta providers. And if you're out using the Terraform validator on GitHub today, there are simple instructions to move to the new Vet. Infrastructure automation with Terraform increases your agility and reduces errors until you have too many things happening, and then the human error and the misconfigurations start to kill you. So policy guardrails are necessary to allow organizations to move fast at scale, securely, and in a cost-effective manner, and the earlier in the dev process, the better to avoid problems with audits down the road. The G-Cloud Beta Terraform Vet provides guardrails and governance for your Terraform configurations to help reduce misconfigurations of Google Cloud resources that violate any of your organization's policies, things like enforcing your organization's policy at any stage of application development, preventing manual errors by automating policy validation, and fail fast with pre-deployment checks.
Yeah, this is a huge announcement, or at least to me, which we've already discussed. I need to get out more, but like these things are super important to get if your company is going to scale, right? When you're a certain size, you can cross-talk communication, you can have the collaboration between your infrastructure engineers, your application engineers, and talk about which TLS version is done at the load balancer, and which instance types do you have reserved instances for, or whatever you have, right? But once you get to a certain size, the communication of those things, that knowledge just gets lost. It's unavailable, and it's really hard. So the only way that you can really do that is by automating these things into policy and giving that feedback sort of in a programmatic fashion. Alternatively, I guess you can have operations engineers own and deploy everything, which sometimes works, but then once you lose the business context, it doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really happy to see these types of things. I struggle with the fact that it's client side, because it does sort of require either you to put a bottleneck in there where all sort of Terraform executions to your Google Cloud go through a known path, or just very educational and getting this installed in everyone's endpoints.
Well, I mean, in an enterprise, you can force it down through policies to the machine, and then you can put it as pre-commit hooks into all your GitHub repos that have Terraform. So, I mean, you could force it down in some ways, and then I think I could see potentially this turning into a server-side capability as well for your build pipelines and things like that in the future. But you got to start somewhere and get people to write these validators. And so, if it's on the client side, that's at least a first good starting place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is one of those things where there are ways you can do it, and people have done it for years. And even HashiCorp, as part of their enterprise offering, has Sentinel, which does a very similar thing. But yeah, having that ability be sort of available to everyone is super key. Although I kind of agree, the Vet name has to go. because it took me 3 tries to figure out what it meant. Like veterinarian. Oh, vet, as in like vet, a good idea. Got it.
Yeah, but it's not even spelled that way. It's spelled VET, like a vet for an animal, or a vet like a veteran of the military. It definitely does. VETTE did not come to mind when I read it the first time either. So
yeah.
Hopefully they'll get that naming fixed sometime in the future. The vet's got to go. We'll see where they go. Well, I have an announcement for you, Ryan, that you are going to be super excited about. It's in your favorite place in the entire world.
Oh, yeah.
There's a new Google Cloud region in Columbus, Ohio, and it's now open.
All right.
Yeah. Bringing your 10th region in the North America for Google Cloud and growing their global cloud region count to 33. Apparently, it also brought over 200 jobs to the state and provides $12.85 billion of economic activity for tens of thousands of Ohio businesses, nonprofits, publishers, creators, and developers who now have access to a Google Cloud region in their backyard.
I'm just excited that I can finally tell the listeners that, it wasn't that I was stranded in Columbus, Ohio in my mother-in-law's basement, battling off COVID. I was really, part of this region deployment and getting it all set up. And of course that all makes sense. You guys believe me, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
I wish you'd gone more like down the path of like I had infiltrated the Google Cloud data center that they were building in Ohio, but I could not get out of the facility because I would have been caught, and so I had to wait for my window, which took 2 weeks. Like that's how I would have played that one off. But you
missed opportunity.
Yeah,
could have talked about the false floor, hiding in the false floor for 3 weeks.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad to know that your mother-in-law and father-in-law will now have a Google Cloud region. They can host all their Kubernetes containers that you run for them. Right there in the backyard. The latency would be much better for them because I'm sure they're big Kubernetes users.
And that will not be hard for me to support remotely at all.
Not at all. Yeah. It's all API driven.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the cloud consulting gurus at Foghorn for helping make the Cloud Pod possible. These folks truly get it. Cloud consulting experts since 2008, they are premier tier partners with AWS, Google Cloud Platform Silver, and Microsoft Azure partners. From multi-cloud to containers to moving full production workloads to the cloud under the tightest compliance, Foghorn's team of full-stack cloud engineers have been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt, and are ready to share their experience with you. If you're in the market for some talent to supplement your team, visit www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. Foghorn, the promise of cloud delivered.
All right, let's move on to Azure. Host process containers are now in public preview. They extend the Windows container model to enable a wider range of Kubernetes cluster management scenarios, and the host process container runs directly on the host and maintain behavior and access similar to that of regular processes, which is really a fancy way of saying we fixed the problem where privileged containers are running in Hyper-V, and we put them into just any given process on a host now. You're welcome.
So much of your, container orchestration management comes from being able to, inspect the host OS and do a whole bunch of things, which you have not been able to do with Windows containers. So you can expect the VM that it's running in, but you have no direct access outside of that. And so it is sort of funny to all the security and all the sort of tout of, running Windows containers in this Hyper-V isolation and stuff like that. Now they've given you an option to undo all that and run privileged containers directly on the host OS.
Which is what we wanted all along, but Windows.
So what's the real use case for that? Is it a matter of running tools and debugging tools and things like that? Like why would you need access to host?
It's access to storage. Devices is a big one, right? Being able to mount volume inside your container can very frequently take access to that guest OS. A lot of security tools require, running in a privileged mode effectively so that they can sort of inject or inspect the Docker socket. There's certain things like that there's not a real heavy, this had to happen, but it's definitely little things here and there that make it sort of certain workloads you couldn't run in a container. You had to run it on the host OS because of this, because you just didn't have any access.
Cool. So it's great when you need it.
Yeah. But
you should try really hard not to need it.
Yeah. This is last resort territory. I tried everything else I could do to make this work, and I need this thing. All right. Well, moving on to Microsoft Build, which, like I mentioned earlier, they did not tell us, or none of our listeners told us that it was coming up, but it was here and it went, and they had lots of things for the builders in the world who are our developer friends. And so we'll talk about some of those real quick. So first up is GitHub Copilot is now generally available, and the reception has been overwhelmingly positive. More than 1/3 of those who signed up for the program have become daily users. And for those of you wondering what it is, it's an AI pair programmer that provides full code suggestions inferred from code and comments as you write it yourself. What do you think about that one?
I cannot wait for the robot overlords to like completely school me at code.
Yeah.
This is going to be hilarious and frightening.
Yeah. Suddenly my self-reflection on my code quality is now much more in my face. And I was like, oh, the AI came up with a much better solution to that problem than I did. It's awkward.
This is like coming back to your code like 6 months later, but in real time.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, this is what the AI said. Well, I wonder if the AI will start competing with itself, because you're right. Like, it's going to learn through MLAI, and so like, does it also have the 6-month problem where 6 months later it's like, oh my god, why did I ever suggest this to this user?
That's going to be a problem, right? Unless they've integrated sensible security tests into this product. Like, is it recommending that you make changes similar to other changes that have been made in other repos? Like, are you going to reintroduce the same types of bugs that other people have introduced?
Well, I'm sure they're training it with Microsoft code, so what could go wrong? Microsoft best practices, my friends. That's how it works. Well, another thing for Build, Microsoft DevBox, which is a new way for developers to spin up virtual machines and provision it, automatically reducing limitations and delays in the cloud. So instead of having your DevBox on your laptop, and your laptop is now your only way to dev, you can now have a container basically running in the cloud that runs all your dev stuff, and you connect to that remotely with an iPad or a computer or a thin client, whatever, and you get that same consistent DevBox experience anywhere in the world, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, as long as this isn't like a glorified VDI sort of offering, which has its own, pitfalls, and this is more truly just being able to provide a quick and ephemeral dev environment, then I'm all for it. This has just been tried a number of times, and there's always just sort of just coming short to having sort of local resources and local testing. So hoping they pulled it off this time.
There's some new hybrid AI app patterns for new edge endpoints, including the Onyx runtime and the Azure machine learning capabilities. And then they gave you low-code solution called Power Pages, a low-code development and hosting platform that allows anyone from low-code maker to professional developer to design, configure, and publish websites for both desktop and mobile through a fluid visual experience. At least they didn't call it a bespoke developer.
They have that going for them. I'd almost pay money to see like a professional developer or someone of that quality sort of use these solutions, because it's always great until it doesn't do exactly what you want.
It's perfect until they hit the edge case where they're like, oh, I can't do it in here, and now I'm having to do all kinds of heroics to make it work.
Yeah.
Express Design in Power Apps, which allows you to upload a PDF, PowerPoint, or even a drawn sketch that expresses design, will convert it into a working app within seconds. That's kind of cool.
Sure,
what?
Sure, it will.
I didn't say it was a functional app, but if you give it a bunch of UI artifacts, it'll make them all link together, and so you can click through these. Yeah, I don't know as much, but yeah, it's a cool idea.
It's a nice idea. In this one very specific use case we used for the demo, it worked great.
Yes. I will send us some PDF PowerPoints I have to see how it does with those later. There's a new text summarization capability for customer support. Users can recap complex conversations to help reduce handling time and improve job satisfaction, which I think is kind of cool. Like, to have this thing listening to your call and then summarize it down for you and send you an update to a ticket. Maybe not be perfect, but hey, it's a plus.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of cool. And then there's a bunch of other things that I mentioned here. The .NET MAUI, which includes the new multi-platform app UI, otherwise known as .NET MAUI, which is now generally available. There's Azure Container Apps, a serverless container hosting service where developers can focus on apps instead of managing underlying cloud infrastructure, i.e. Kubernetes is hard. There's a new Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, which is a new integrated platform that unifies databases, analytics, and governance to empower organizations to invest more time creating value rather than integrating and managing a fragmented data estate. There's the new live share experience for apps and teams, which takes screen sharing and meetings to the next level by making Teams meeting stage interactive, which I don't know what that actually means, but it sounds terrifying, and I can't wait for that to get enabled in my team space in the next week or two, and all of a sudden people are taking over my presentation. Can't wait. Developers can build the live share apps and teams and let meeting participants edit, annotate, zoom in and out, and interact with shared content in new ways. ugh. And then the metaverse was mentioned many times, and I just say yuck. So moving on.
Yeah, I'll think about the metaverse when I have like a valid use case that this makes sense for. Till then, no.
Yeah, you have to see that use case. I'm still waiting.
Yes, like when I can upload my consciousness and live forever, then I'll be interested in the metaverse. Other than that, I'll stay away.
World of Warcraft, but for business, like pass.
Yeah,
it just as like
Second Life to me is that way. It's
exactly,
like, yeah.
Second Life. Yeah.
All right, and then the new public preview for Nginx for Azure. Nginx for Azure is a SaaS solution for advanced traffic management and monitoring. The Azure integration enables ease of use of the provisioning and configuration in a couple of steps through the Azure portal. Have you guys configured Nginx? It's not hard. I don't know why you need a portal. You can leverage features such as JSON Web Token authentication and active health checks with built-in security integration with Azure Key Vault for SSL TLS certificate management. And you can purchase a solution through the Azure Marketplace, receive a unified bill for all your services used on Azure, and leverage existing enterprise agreements that you already have with Nginx or F5 because they own it.
Yeah, I just love paying the markup for the marketplace Nginx when I can just buy it from the vendor. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you go with the Nginx enterprise capabilities that you can buy from them, they have some cool management tools. I wonder if you get some of those built into the portal with this, or no, it's just buy it through the marketplace, pay more money.
Yeah. And if you can capitalize on your existing commitment, great.
And then our last Azure story, they have gone and provided us a ledger for crypto. And where would you, of course, store a ledger crypto item in Microsoft's world? Well, of course, SQL Server. So Azure SQL database allows you to enable cryptographic proofs the database has not been tampered with, and you can enable ledger functionality on tables in your database and interact with the same way as you would for any other tables. If even a single bit is altered in the database verification process will detect and report the change, and most likely take that database offline and make it so you can't use anything anymore until you fix it. That's how Microsoft does things. Strong protection.
I really don't understand the need for this because, I mean, a database is meant to be dynamic. It's designed to be a data store and a management system to manage updates and querying data live. Like, you would think that changing data is something that happens regularly in a database. If you're referring to static data, don't keep it in a database. It makes no sense.
Well, so I think the use case for this, if I would read between the lines, is that there's many times you need to have an auditing use case in your database where you need to have an audit log that, Ryan went in and changed the permissions to admin for this user, or so-and-so went in and changed this value. And since you need to have this highly reliable audit log, if you put it into a ledger type format, then you could say, there's no way to change the ledger, and it tracks every change at a very tight level, which is a really extreme level of auditing. And but it would solve that use case. That's the only thing I can think why they maybe did this was they think it was, there was a hackathon at some point, and someone was like, I can build an audit database with ledgers, and that's why we're here now. But I don't know.
I mean that it makes sense because I know that historically now, to continue my theme on compliance today, it's traditionally the review process is transactional. So it's going through each and every change and either searching for the actions that you care about or going through all of them. So if that can be sort of programmatically done in the sense, where you can verify the content hasn't changed because of the signature of versus a ledger.
Yeah, I make fun, but I can see the use cases where this would be relevant, and that would be things like healthcare, because you need to know that somebody hasn't gone in and changed a diagnosis or some data or something else outside of the scope of the application. And I guess building it into the service and having it be sort of qualified in that way looks awesome for the auditors. There's no way, great. So these users have access. These users have these particular permissions to update these tables or read these tables. But having the service itself tell you when something changed is potentially useful for some very limited use cases.
Yeah, it's not a large use case.
They pay a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very large use case, but I can see, it's one less thing I have to manage if I'm on the SQL Server world, and I don't have to now learn, really complicated ledger technology. I just need something like this. So, I mean, it may actually be a good launching pad for some companies into more ledger type technologies, just because it's there and it's easy. And then, of course, then they have the migration problem to get it out of the ledger and SQL into something that's real. But, it's a different problem for a different day. That's future guy's problem.
Yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately you'd still need to. Great, you have this ledger that says these changes were made. Ultimately, you need to reconcile those things back to, well, what made the changes and why did they make those changes? And it doesn't solve for that.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, let's move on to the TCP lightning round. We have decided that we need to start scoring these because basically Jonathan was like, I'm only 3 points behind Justin. I can catch up to him, but if we don't start scoring this, we're going to run out of year. And since Peter has been here for a while, we need to. So we're going to mutually try to agree on who gets the point, which I think we're honest enough with each other that we can admit who was the funniest one. And I think this is also driven by the fact that Jonathan last week felt like he fully won, but we didn't score it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so we're supporting Jonathan's cry for points. So we're going to do this week, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll go from there. So Ryan, you are up first. You drew the short straw because I put your name first to read this off.
To kick it off, Amazon Chime SDK now supports video background replacement and blur on iOS and Android.
I keep waiting for face blurring so no one will know that I'm actually using Chime.
Like those news reports where it's like the hidden identity, you change the voice and blur the face. Like that's what I want for all my Chime videos.
Perfect.
In public preview, Azure Digital Twins 3D Scene Studio.
Again, Azure trying to get on Ryan's territory, just like AWS. Going after those twins, man.
If you have 3 dimensions and you only have 2 ends, math doesn't add up.
Well, yeah. Oh, well. Now in general availability, Azure Backup supports backup of write accelerator enabled disks, which, makes me concerned that my write accelerated disks weren't backed up before. Yeah. So hopefully those writes weren't important. They were so fast, they skipped backups.
This is memory cache? I'm confused.
Yep.
Amazon EC2 enables customers to protect instances from unintentional stop actions.
Which was what, I guess I was really more worried about unintentional, terminate actions, but I guess I care that you stopped the database server, but why didn't you just make this do both at the time? Like, was it that hard to enable a second block? Like, okay, if they hit stop or they hit terminate, you just put an or statement in the code, right? Like, this isn't hard. These are the 2 conditions I want you to basically not let them do. But it took, this feature is at least a year after the first one came out. So, well done.
Well, isn't this just termination protection, but against stop protection?
That's all it is. Yes, that's my point.
Like, that's been around for years. So, this is just check this box and then check this other box if you also want to.
Yeah, I was saying it's a if this or this, then this. It's a simple statement in code. I don't understand.
No, some product person for EC2 retired, and they stood their ground on this, saying if our customers are going to stop their resources, more power to them. And then they retired, and now it's been forced through. I'm certain of it.
Scale your cloud native apps and accelerate app modernization with Azure. The best cloud for your apps. TM.
Boo.
Yeah.
You just put this here because you wanted to poke fun at that title, because that is horrendous.
that is. Yeah, normally this wouldn't make the show, but that one's just too ridiculous.
Well, this is one of those build press releases where they were like, "Hey, we're going to put a bunch of stuff into a big fluffy article," and you had to scroll through it and find the words that are bold because it was as the actual announcement part of them. Azure Managed Grafana is in here, and Azure Arc, which is their on-prem version of Azure, and then business critical tier for Azure Arc enabled SQL managed instances, bullshit like that. So yes, great, well deserved in lightning round.
Yeah, 9 out of 10 cats prefer Azure.
Announcing multi-account support for AWS Transit Gateway Network Manager.
Oh, this is perfect. Now I can fight with our network team. No, I don't want that traffic to route through that route table. Now, put it back. Yeah, so we can just go back and forth, changing the routes on each other forever. Fantastic.
I mean, wasn't the whole point of Transit Gateway to be for multi-account traffic routing? That was the whole point to begin with. So now I'm glad they finally got support for it in the network manager for the thing that was built to solve multi-account transit problems. Super appreciate that.
I think this is just more we deployed the Transit Gateway in that old account. Crap, we can't move it now. Everything's routed through there.
It's like when this VPC gave its account, it said it was connected, but the other VP says it's not. I'm like, yeah.
Google Cloud establishes European Advisory Board.
Microsoft's under some antitrust troubles. What can we do to make the European regulators happy? Here's what. We'll put a non-binding council in place as an advisory board, and we'll put a bunch of people who sound impressive on it, and we'll hope that makes the EU go away. See, we have people who care about the EU who are on our advisory board.
To be fair, that's just as much backing as the Microsoft announcement has. So,
Yep.
I think it's like the other way around, though. I think you create the advisory board, and then you pretend that it's full of experts, and you set policy, and people follow along.
I mean, there's and none of these people are bad. I don't mean to make fun of them in any way, because they're all lovely people. But like a co-founder, an executive chairman of Founders Factory, or former Minister of French State for Foreign Trade, Minister of State for Transport, and member of the Assemblée Nationale in France. Like, yes, you have connections to people who might make our lives difficult. I'm going to put you on an advisory council. Thank you for that.
It's called LAAS. It's Lobbying as a Service.
Yes. Perfect.
Run your fault-tolerant workloads cost-effectively with Google Cloud Spot VMs, now generally available.
Which there's two words here that don't go together: fault-tolerant and spot instances. If it's really that fault-tolerant, you probably it's probably got to be up high resiliency levels. So maybe not spot for you. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is you just have to deploy twice as many of them because they're going to go down in 30 seconds. Hopefully not all of them.
I mean, no one uses the Google Cloud, right? So spot market must be pretty stable.
I mean, I make fun of this announcement, but I like this model a little better than the preemptive model, where it's just like it's going to get reset every 24 hours.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is more akin to what people thought the preemptive market actually was, but it wasn't. And the preemptive thing makes sense if you have a very specific use case that only runs for 12, 14 hours a day and you don't really care. But yeah, a 24-hour where it cuts you off is a little harsh.
Yeah. And buried in this announcement is all the integration with partners for different things. Like, if you want to run a Slurm workload, which I now know what is kind of, they built in spot support in the latest thing. So now you can, have your Slurm jobs can use these spot instances, which if they die, it's fine. It's not. That's what it's built to do.
I'm sort of fascinated with the story here. So how do you find about Slurm? Because we made fun of it so badly. Did one of your coworkers who you forced to listen to our show be like, "Hey, stop making fun of the Slurm. I know what it is, and here's what it is. You hippie."
Oh, I have multiple personalities, so I just did it to myself.
Oh, okay. I see. Well, that's why you didn't get the show notes done. Check. Okay.
Exactly.
Researching Slurm. GKA workload right sizing from recommendations to actions.
I think I'm officially out of a job now, right?
I mean, it sounds like a Manning book. I just wonder what the picture on the front of the book is going to be.
Someone with a weird
O'Reilly animal.
Yeah.
Unlock real-time insights from your Oracle data in BigQuery.
Yes. How many times have we been sued this week?
How much money could we save if we could convince our developers to move off of Oracle in BigQuery this week?
Yeah, but we really need to stop developers making those decisions as to the technology choices, I think.
Oh, developers choose that? Yeah, right.
Well, I used to use this at my old job, and so, you see it all the time.
I could do this work for you in 3 days if you let me use Oracle. Or
exactly.
If you want me to learn this new technology, it'll take me 6 months. And then everyone's like, yeah, we need the thing in 2 days. So that's how you end up with that.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, you especially hear that all the time when it comes to DBA type work. It's like people have been working with that particular product for years. It could be decades. And it's, I know this, I trust this. This is what I think we should recommend. And so we end up being stuck with these old products. And people really need to take a step back and figure out, like, does it make sense anymore? Mm-hmm. You hire a SQL expert, what are they going to recommend? SQL Server.
I mean, that's not what this announcement does at all.
No.
This is just taking your transactions and publishing to a queue
Oracle.
so that you can do analytics. But
I'm just really happy I got those real-time insights from Jonathan on how he feels about Oracle. That's what I really enjoyed about that.
I love Oracle as long as I don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an amazing product. It really is. Draft 2, an open source project for developers building apps on Kubernetes.
Oh, I wonder what Draft 1 looked like.
Yeah. Kubernetes is so hard, we had to do it again. Yeah, this is rough.
That's from Azure, I think.
And yeah, it is from Azure. So like Kubernetes is so hard, Azure had to fix it. Like, yikes.
Twice. That's the worst part.
You can only get a rough draft.
General availability this week, Azure Backup support for trusted launch Azure virtual machines. So trusted, we didn't back them up before, now backed up.
I think this is the part of the show where Jonathan has to explain to me what a trusted Azure virtual machine is again.
He throws up his hands in disgust. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Gestures as a service. Yeah.
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 Oh, and one of our favorites now in public preview, the Azure Stream Analytics no-code editor.
Yay.
Is that it?
That's it.
Oh,
that's it.
Okay.
That's the entire announcement.
That's the whole
Okay.
thing. There was no code after that.
Yeah.
But this is Azure Stream is their version of Kinesis Firehose. So I'm glad that you can now connect boxes together to make things pretty in your data stream. Good luck to you.
And finally, introducing the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform.
If only the data was that intelligent.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I had to bring the intelligence to the data. The platform doesn't provide it for me.
This is like just add water. So just add intelligence.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that happen yet.
Not in the data world. I have not. Those are facts.
The press release for this reads like a movie trailer. Though it's like, we are moving to a world where every application needs to be intelligent and adaptive to real-time model learning.
That's pretty awesome. I love how they say today we unveiled the new Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, the leading cloud data platform that fully integrates databases, analytics, and governance. How do you know it's the leading one? You released it today.
Like, you have 0 customers.
Yeah, it's leading because it's the first of its kind. Wait, what? Yeah.
Yes, leading because we just
people.
released it. Yeah.
In a race of one.
And now they also gave you SQL. Oh, this article also gave you SQL Server 2022 is in preview. Great. So I can upgrade all my SQL databases again. It's fantastic. Yay. Sweet. All right. We won this thing, you guys. Wow, that went well.
Yeah, coming soon will be the real way that we negotiate this out. But yeah, I think that the only one that I think was a showstopper was a lot like last week's, and so my vote would have to go to Jonathan.
Well,
For what?
What was it? I was like, for what?
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean, if Jonathan's voting for himself, that's 2-1, and I lose on this one. But I don't know if even Jonathan agrees. So it feels like there's one vote for Jonathan, but he was not in support. All in favor of Ryan?
I'm not even
all in
voting
favor of me? All right, so not having Peter here may
we're
still
gonna
be
have to come up with something. We're gonna run this through some sort of AI program.
Yeah,
something.
Maybe the listeners can just tell us which one they like the best, and then we can just give someone a point. Like, and it only take one listener to email us about it, because no one else will email us. We'll see.
That'd be pretty funny, actually.
That would be hilarious. All right. Well, things coming up that was not Microsoft Build, because again, no one told me. But we have on June 9th the Google Applied ML Summit. So if you want to try to learn what things like Slurm are, or other things like that, you can now go to the Applied ML Summit, which will teach you professional machine learning engineers, researchers, data scientists, data analysts, and developers, all invited to come explore the latest products and feature updates and unlock new skills to build, deploy, and manage meaningful ML models faster, which is all googly to me, but appreciate that. There's the June 28th is the Sustainability Summit, which is all about sustainability with the Google Cloud. So that's always great if you're into that. And then we've got the RSA conference, which probably comes right around the time this episode drops. So hurry up, you want to go to that. Remars is following very quickly after that in June 21st, 24th. AWS Reinforce is going to be June 28th to 29th. Do you think they're going to announce anything cool there, or do you think that's going to be a dud? What do you guys think? Do you think they're going to learn their lesson from 3 years ago before pandemic, or do you think they've forgotten everything because that was 100 years ago?
I mean, the optimist really hopes that they do something, because otherwise I think that it's, they're going to struggle to keep that conference. But And the more we can diversify and not have everyone go to reInvent. Yay. But, like the realist in me is like, nah, what happened 2 years ago or 3 years ago is gone.
Well, they do pitch those conferences as educational rather than, mind-blowing new features and things. So I think it's about going there and mingling with people, as is reInvent. So I don't.
They also started announcing stuff at summits and those things, which make me think this is all part of a sort of move to diversify a little bit. But
it is May, and this week Amazon did announce the tickets are on sale now for reInvent. So if you would like to plan really far in advance about how you think COVID's going to be going, you too can sign up for the conference now and either get a refund later or you get to go. I don't know how that's going to work. We'll see. That's going to be November 28th through December 2nd, once again in Las Vegas, beautiful Las Vegas. And apparently there will be a keynote by Adam Slipsky and other executive speakers, is all they've told us so far. So it'll be interesting because this will be the first one without Adam. No, did he do keynote last time?
No, he did the last one.
Yeah, so second one. So we'll see if he took our critiques. That's right, we critiqued some of his things. We'll see. We are not planning to go to reInvent, I don't think. But we're planning to go
from our secure bunker.
Yeah, we're going to be finding a secure bunker.
Getting worse again.
Yeah. So, our plan all along was that we're going to go someplace else exotic, because really what we learned about reInvent was that we just like to hang out with each other for a week and drink a lot of beer. And so we're just going to go find a place to do that, and then we'll live stream it on Twitch, our live reactions to the keynotes, and then Peter has to be there for his job, but we don't. So we'll just call him. We'll call him as our man on the scene to tell us what's going on site. So this will work out. So we got to plan where we're going, but that's our plan. So
do we have like the budget for like a wind machine and like a water machine?
I mean, we haven't established the budget quite yet, but we can work that out. So we can talk about that later off the show. But but we do, if any of our listeners have cabins they'd like to donate to this purpose or any place that makes sense. It'd be an undisclosed CloudPod location where it would be, that way Amazon can't get mad at us and attack us because they don't know where we're at. That's how it's going to work.
Right. Like they won't know where we're at.
All right. Well, that's all I can talk about that's coming up this right now, because everything else is in August and no one will remember in June what's happening in August. So I'll ping you up with those things that are happening later. Also, just to go check out that Microsoft website to see if they've updated it, because apparently I have in the notes here Microsoft events TBD. Check here for status, which I apparently did not do, which is why I missed out on build. So there you go. It's all my fault, like I said earlier. All right, guys, have a great week. See you next week here in the cloud.
Have a good weekend.
Bye, everybody.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel. Go to our website, thecloudpod.net, for sign-up instructions.